When the fence went up, Harold Lawson had lived on his sprawling ranch for over 40 years. It wasn't just land to him. It was a lifetime of sweat, memories, and legacy. Every fence post, every oak tree, and every winding dirt road had been part of his life's work. His property stretched for miles, with rolling pastures, grazing livestock, and a quiet solitude that most people could only dream of. For decades, life on the ranch had been peaceful. Neighbors waved across fences. The county road ran gently past the edge of his property, and the few local ranchers in the area respected his boundaries. But all of that changed when the HOA, formed by a group of newer, younger homeowners who had moved to the outskirts of the rural county, decided they had the authority to impose community standards on Harold. It started with letters, politely worded but firm. They complained about his old barn, the unpaved road that led to his house, and even his livestock grazing habits. Then came the official notice. The HOA had approved a plan to improve community access by installing a large fence along the edge of Harold's property, effectively blocking off his main entry. The reason? According to them, his ranch road intersected a shared access easement, even though Harold's deeds clearly stated otherwise. The day the fence went up, Harold drove past in his pickup and felt a strange weight in his chest. Heavy metal posts rose from the ground like a wall of defiance. Wires stretched taut, and a shiny new gate blocked the familiar dirt road he had driven for decades. It wasn't just a fence, it was a statement. The HOA wanted to control him, to limit his freedom, to make him bow to their rules. He walked the perimeter of his land, measuring every post, examining every bolt, and mentally noting the intrusion. Every letter he had sent, every deed in his filing cabinet. Every proof of ownership flashed in his mind. The HOA had assumed compliance. They assumed he would grumble quietly, maybe even pay a fine to have the fence removed or altered. They had no idea that Harold Lawson had never been one to quietly comply. Over the next week, the HOA tried to assert control. They placed signs warning people not to use unauthorized property access. They circulated newsletters calling the fence community enhancement. And they even tried to levy fines against Harold for trespassing on his own land if he crossed a new line of posts. Their arrogance stunned the small town. Harold observed quietly from his porch, coffee in hand, the rising sun casting long shadows across the block path. He wasn't angry, at least not outwardly. Instead, he was calculating. Harold had spent years studying property law for fun, keeping meticulous records of every deed, easement, and boundary line related to his ranch. He knew exactly what he could do to turn the situation to his advantage. The fence wasn't just a blockade. It was an opportunity. He began researching toll roads and private easements, drawing up detailed plans to convert the gate into a controlled entry point. If the HOA wanted to limit access, Harold would do the same, but legally, strategically, and profitably. The idea was simple. Every vehicle that wanted to pass through his ranch's main road would now pay a fee. It wasn't about greed. It was about control, respect, and sending a message that his land could not be seized, obstructed, or ignored. By the end of the first week, Harold had ordered signs, gates, and a manual toll system. He mapped out a plan that would make the gate functional, secure, and enforceable by law. The HOA assumed they had won. They had erected the fence, posted notices, and expected compliance. They had no idea the fight was only beginning, because Harold Lawson wasn't just a rancher. He was a strategist, a man who had defended his property through storms, disputes, and decades of small-town politics. And now, the fence they thought would contain him would become their first mistake, turning the gate into gold. Harold spent the next several days putting his plan into motion. The old gate that the HOA had assumed was merely a barrier suddenly became the centerpiece of his strategy. He installed a sturdy lock system, painted clear signage declaring private property, and drafted a small toll schedule for anyone who wished to pass through. Not surprisingly, it wasn't intended for neighbors. This was for the HOA and any outsiders who felt entitled to traverse his land without permission. He also consulted his lawyer to ensure that every step he was taking was legally airtight. The toll road concept was simple. Harold owned the land, he controlled access, and anyone who crossed without consent would be considered trespassing. By establishing a legitimate toll system, He could turn the gate into a revenue stream while reinforcing his authority over property. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. At first, it was a trickle of whispers. Have you seen Harold's gate now? He's charging people to drive through his ranch. The intrigue was palpable. The older homeowners, those with decades of rural experience like Harold, admired his ingenuity. Younger HOA members were stunned. Never had they imagined that their carefully built fence would be turned against them. The first morning of enforcement arrived. A pickup truck carrying 2 HOA board members pulled up, expecting to waltz through the gate as usual. They were met with Harold, clipboard in hand, calmly explaining the toll policy. The board members protested, citing community access rules. Harold responded with documents, deeds, and county property maps. The legal weight of the evidence left them speechless. Soon, the gate became more than a blockade. It became a symbol. Every vehicle that entered paid a small fee, which Harold noted meticulously. The HOA tried to negotiate, offering apologies and subtle threats, but Harold remained steadfast. The gate was his, the toll was legal, and the property rights were unassailable. Each attempt by the HOA to bypass the gate was met with polite refusal and documented proof of trespassing. Meanwhile, Harold expanded the system. He installed cameras to monitor the road, automated a small payment kiosk, and even created a log for authorized visitors. He treated the process like any professional toll operation, making it clear that this was not arbitrary or petty. It was enforcement of law, order, and respect. As the weeks passed, the HOA's influence over the neighborhood waned. Their repeated complaints, meetings, and attempts to override Harold's rights were met with documentation, legal reminders, and public evidence of their missteps. Neighbors began to question the board's authority, realizing that Harold's decades of experience and careful record-keeping had exposed how overreaching the HOA had become. Harold's strategy achieved more than control. It shifted the power dynamic entirely. The once dominant HOA board now had to navigate the reality that Harold's land, the gate, and the toll system were untouchable. Their fence, meant to confine him, had only highlighted their misjudgment and ignorance of property law. But Harold didn't stop there. He began inviting local media and curious neighbors to witness the operation. Articles about the ranch, the gate, and the clever turnaround circulated quickly. His story became the talk of nearby counties, a lesson in defending property rights with intelligence, patience, and strategy. By the end of the month, the HOA was forced into a corner. Their legal threats faltered under scrutiny, and their attempt to pressure Harold into removing the toll system were rejected in writing, with his lawyer ensuring each response was concise, professional, and binding. Harold had taken what was intended as a restriction and turned it into an advantage, creating not only a safeguard for his ranch, but also a powerful reminder. Anyone who underestimates decades of experience, knowledge, and patience will learn the hard way that property rights are not to be challenged lightly. The HOA's humiliation and Harold's lasting victory. By the time the HOA realized the full consequences of their actions, Harold's toll gate was no longer just a clever stunt. It had become a fully functioning system, respected by neighbors and legally reinforced. The board had spent weeks trying to negotiate, intimidate, and persuade Harold to remove the toll, but every attempt was met with calm, methodical responses backed by property deeds, county records, and legal advice. The same fence they had built to block him had become a monument to their own misjudgment. The first weekend of full operation brought an influx of curious neighbors and even a few local reporters. Cameras captured the simple yet dramatic scene, a rugged dirt road blocked by a sturdy gate, with Harold calmly managing a small toll booth. Vehicles approached, some hesitantly, some skeptically, and every driver was stopped, asked for authorization, and informed of the toll. Each payment was documented, receipts issued, and a log maintained for authorized visitors. It wasn't excessive. Harold had set a nominal fee, but it was enough to reinforce that access to his property was no longer a given. The HOA board attempted their usual tactics. Denise, the HOA president, sent official letters citing supposed community easement rights, claiming Harold's toll system was illegal and threatening fines. But Harold had anticipated this. Each letter was met with a reply from his lawyer, detailing the exact legal boundaries, referencing the original deeds, and highlighting the HOA's lack of jurisdiction over the ranch road. Every attempt they made to assert authority crumbled under scrutiny, leaving them increasingly frustrated and publicly humiliated. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. The older homeowners, many of whom had quietly sympathized with Harold, began to voice their support. Conversations in local stores, at weekend barbecues, and even at church gatherings turned to admiration for Harold's resolve. Younger board members, who had once believed that installing the fence meant they controlled the situation, now realized that experience, patience, and careful legal preparation outweighed youthful boldness and overconfidence. One afternoon, 2 board members attempted to bypass the gate by driving along a narrow side path that skirted Harold's property. They were met with cameras capturing their trespass and immediate legal notices served via certified mail. It was a textbook example of the consequences of ignoring rightful property ownership. The embarrassment to the board was immense, and the local media coverage only amplified their humiliation. As the weeks went on, Harold refined his toll system further. He added better signage, improved the lock mechanisms, and even created a simple online authorization for approved visitors. What had started as a defensive strategy had become a small, efficient operation, practical, legal, and a clear statement of control. Any attempt to undermine him was documented and countered before it could escalate. By the time the HOA tried to convene an emergency board meeting to address the situation, they found themselves divided. Some members argued that continued confrontation was futile, while others still clung to their misguided belief in community entitlement. Their internal conflicts became public knowledge, further eroding their credibility. Meanwhile, Harold remained patient, watching from his porch, surveying the well-kept road and the functional gate that had transformed their interference into a showcase of his authority. The turning point came when a neighboring family, who had previously supported the HOA's initial actions, drove up to pay the toll and were greeted courteously by Harold. They left impressed with the professionalism and legality of his system, acknowledging that he had every right to control access. This small but symbolic moment spread quickly, and the HOA's influence waned further. Eventually, the board ceased all active opposition. Their threats of legal action evaporated under the weight of evidence, public opinion, and Harold's unwavering stance. The toll gate remained, operational and respected, a constant reminder that the ranch and its owner could not be manipulated, intimidated, or bypassed. Harold didn't gloat. He restored the section of road near the gate, maintained his pastures, and continued life on his ranch with the calm satisfaction of someone who had faced interference, turned it into an advantage, and emerged victorious. The toll gate was more than a barrier. It was a symbol of resilience, preparation, and the importance of defending what is rightfully yours. In the end, Harold Lawson had not only secured his property, but also sent a powerful message. When authority oversteps its bounds, knowledge, patience, and legal clarity are the most effective weapons. The HOA had learned, albeit painfully, that control without legitimacy is meaningless. And for Harold, the ranch and the gate were now stronger than ever, standing as a testament to decades of hard work, wisdom, and an unyielding commitment to his rights. The once contentious fence had become a legacy of clever strategy and unwavering resolve, ensuring that the ranch, the road, and the life he had built will remain entirely his, unchallenged and fully respected.